Hi, folks. My name is Michael Detroit, and I'm the executive producer at Playhouse on the Square. And I want to welcome you to this very special talkback session for our production of Nat Turner in Jerusalem. Now, we've been streaming shows the past couple of months. We did I Am My Own Wife last month, Nat Turner in Jerusalem this month. We've got a show called Murder for Two, which will be next month, and then two more shows after that. So keep in touch with all of our marketing materials, some wonderful, exciting streaming opportunities coming your way. So keep in touch with us on that. Nat Turner in Jerusalem opened last Friday, and it ran Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and it's coming up again beginning this Friday at 7 o'clock, Saturday at 7 o'clock, and Sunday at 2 o'clock. So I encourage you, if you are watching this, to buy those tickets as soon as you can once this is over, so that you can watch this wonderful show. I've seen it. I'm so proud of the cast and the production team and the director on this. And I think you'll be pleasantly surprised and enjoy the evening of great theater. The way you do that, you go to playhouseonthesquare.org and click on the link for streaming tickets, and then just follow the prompts and to purchase your streaming ticket for that particular performance that you want to see the show. You can also go to our streaming platform, which is called showtix4u.com. If you search Playhouse on the Square, you can find this particular show, as well as perhaps some of our other upcoming streaming shows as well. So this show will run through this coming Sunday. So you only have 4 days now to catch our show. Nat Turner in Jerusalem is written by Nathan Allen Davis. A little bit about Mr. Davis. He's done a lot of great work. His plays have been produced at the New York Theater Workshop, the McCarter Theater, Public Theater, Arena Theater, the Williamstown Theater Festival. He has many awards for his plays that he has created, including the Blue Ink Award and the Lorraine Hansberry Award. So we're so fortunate to be able to produce his show. We want to take a moment to thank our sponsor for all of the shows that we do at Playhouse on the Square, and that's Dr. Thomas Ratliff. And we would not be able to do all of the streaming that we've been doing since we shut down last March, a year ago. Over 200 hours of streaming material in our marketing department, theater education, and of course our on-stage productions. And we would not be able to do that without grants from the Genium Foundation, Arts Memphis, and the Tennessee Arts Commission. So without further ado, I want to bring a few other folks to the screen, introduce them. Our director for the show is Lawrence Blackwell. Now, Lawrence currently is the in-school director of in-school programs at the Memphis Music Initiative. He was formerly at the Hattie Lou Theater for a number of years as director of outreach and education. Lawrence is both an actor and a director, and as anybody in theater, has done a lot of jobs in the theater, but previously you may have seen him as Martin Luther King in Katori Hall's The Mountaintop. That was a co-production with Playhouse on the Square with Hattie Lou a number of years ago. And previous directing credits include Detroit 67, Admissions, Radio Golf, Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, Gem of the Ocean, The Meeting, and many others. So welcome to the screen, Lawrence Blackwell. Thank you for being here, Lawrence. Want to introduce our fantastic cast. We have two actors in the cast. The first one I'll bring to the screen is Marcus Cox. Marcus is our Director of Community Relations at Playhouse on the Square, doing a wonderful job, very energized in that department, but he's also an actor, among many other things, in theater. Marcus has done many shows at Playhouse over the years. Previously, you may have seen him in Sophisticated Ladies, in Blue, Ragtime, more recently in our production of Sweat at the Circuit Playhouse, and Kinky Boots at Playhouse on the Square. He's done many shows at the Hattie Lou Theater as well, and at the University of Memphis. And he just recently was awarded as one of the young professionals of Memphis in 2021 by the Memphis Chamber of Commerce. So a well-rounded person, and we're so happy to have him at Playhouse on the Square. The other cast member is Donald Sutton. Donald is a resident company member at Playhouse. He's into his second year at Playhouse on the Square. He's done many things on stage. Certainly, he has been one of the forces getting all of our streaming technology up and running. He put those high school AV skills to work over this past year for sure. And thank goodness we had him and other folks like Pedro da Silva working to make sure that all of this streaming really, has come across very professionally. And we'll mention some of the other folks a little bit later of the production team. Donald, you may have seen him on our stage in Book of Will, in Indecent. He played the lead in Cabaret, one of the leads in Cabaret, as Cliff. Tuck Everlasting, The Legend of Georgia McBride, Significant Other, Little Women. He's done many other shows, of course, back in school. And Memphis, unfortunately, is going to be losing him come in the fall because he is following his girlfriend to Boston, who's off to get her master's degree. And we'll be missing Donald for sure. I'm sure he'll be back. Folks always come back to Memphis and Playhouse on the Square eventually. So folks, welcome to the screen. And thank you all for all that you have been doing for this production and moving forward. So I want to get rid of me talking a bunch, and I'm going to jump right into this. Lawrence, if you wouldn't mind, just give a brief synopsis of the show. We don't want to obviously give too much away, but obviously this is an account of an historical event, fictionalized somewhat, of course, but if you'll kind of take it from there and maybe give our audience a clue as to what this show is all about.
Yes, thank you so much. So Nat Turner in Jerusalem is based on the accounts of Thomas Gray, who wrote the biography of Nat Turner, who was one of two Western American leaders of a slave revolt. So we have only had two, Nat Turner, African American, and Toussaint Louverture in Haiti. So this is really a big moment in American history. And as we say, the cast and the crew and I, as we've discussed this play over and over, really looked at this as not a historical play, but more of a commentary on what is American history from 1700 to today. And what it is looking at is what are the oppressive, the stimuli for oppression, and what is the stimuli for our capacity to revolt. And that really focuses on what are our moral ideals? What are our moral dilemmas? What do we believe is acceptable as we fight for our struggle for freedom? And that was really the backbone for this play. Anybody who has studied Nat Turner or looked at this can look at it in any vein, in any light. What he did was horrific, what he did was heroic, what he did was okay, what he did was kind of bad. You can gauge it in any way, but the real impetus behind this is what are we willing to do with our moral compass as we continue to struggle for this idea of freedom? Not as a Black American, not as a white American, but as individuals, as human beings. So what really drew me to this was, one, we got to present the history of Nat Turner, which is not typically taught in American history, but we also got to query what it is to be human, what it means to fight for what we believe, and what does fighting entail? And is there an alternative to the ways that we have thought about fighting? So that's what we bring to bear in this tale of Nat Turner.
Obviously some great points in here. You bring up, ideas of revolt, ideas of moral dilemmas, moral compass, fighting for what you believe in. One of the many reasons we chose to present this show was because, quite frankly, there is a great sense of the urgency of what's happening in our society currently. as it pertains to race, and on many levels, in that regard. It's not just one thing about race, it's many things about race. I want to throw it over to Marcus a little bit, because obviously, Marcus, you're playing Nat Turner in this production. What have you been able to, and I'm going to oversimplify it so that you can really, expound at greater length. What are you bringing to this production as Marcus Cox portraying Nat Turner, and what you think is important, what Marcus Cox thinks is important as we relate this to the public watching this show?
Right. Oh, yeah, start with the easy questions. The biggest thing, and Lawrence kind of pointed to it as well, is that what this play does is that it brings a humanity and a life to Nat Turner, whereas what we have learned historically has, truly been written from the hands of someone else and not from his own scribe. So, we have to take it at face value that the Confessions of Nat Turner, written by Thomas Gray, are his words, but there's always that question, especially the more we know about what we know of history, is that it's written by the victors, right? So we have to, say, where does, Thomas begin and Nat end, and vice versa. So what I did, as an actor, was to remind myself always that I was portraying him as a person, as a man, as an enslaved man, and what that means. And then, also as a father and a husband and as a man of God. And so for me, obviously, I don't know what it feels like to be actually enslaved, but there are many things that go on our day-to-day life, as a young Black man, that I find myself enslaved in. I can't drive my car from one point to another without a sense of just a little bit of trepidation, or care and concern. I keep, my daughter is almost 14 years old, but I have stuffed animals in the car, and I keep the magnets to her swim class that she hasn't taken for 10 years on the back of my car, just in the hopes that if I do have a police officer follow me, that they'll go, oh well, he's the dad of a young kid, and maybe they'll leave me alone. So there is that idea, that enslavement, that feeling of being alone, even being surrounded by a lot of people, that's where I took that idea of enslavement, that idea of being, trapped in your own self. That's kind of where I pull a lot from. And then, of course, being a father and being a husband, there's that personal way that I can certainly relate to him, and the idea of not being able to be responsible, or, being able to ensure their freedom or their safety, is something that is very hard to go with. But the main thing was, to really make him a human being and feel that his feelings of hearing from God and knowing that that's what he was supposed to be doing, whether he even felt it right or wrong, he felt it just because it came from another place. That's kind of where I pulled all that from.
Yeah, I mean, as actors, and we've all been actors. I've been an actor myself, and it's trying to find those things we can connect to, and we go back to our classes in college and high school. We talk about the method and all of those different things. Biomechanical acting, all the technical stuff that's there. But really, it comes down to what we can do as an artist presenting this, bringing this forward. And I think you bring up a really good point about who's presenting this story, right? So yes, these are the words coming out of the actor's mouth as Nat Turner, but it in essence it's a version by Thomas, who has put Thomas Gray, who has put this all down, then with a Black playwright who has taken that and put that into a piece, right? So there's a lot of poetry in this. There are monologues, there's dialogue, but there's certain pieces where the actor is by themselves, talking about what they're going through. And I'm going to get to you in a second, Donald, about some of that. But Marcus and Lawrence, tell me a little bit about how you approached that poetry. Some of those pieces that they're not necessarily naturally flowing pieces of verbiage. It's emotional. Speak a little bit to that, perhaps.
Marcus, I'm going to jump in real quick,
yes,
because
please.
I'm going to explain what I came in the very first rehearsal with the actors and said, in any acting school, any acting class that you will ever take in this world, you're taught, look for the goal, look for the objective, look for your tactics, look for your obstacles, and play those. And I said, that is not necessarily where this play lands. This play is truly about expression from the heart, expression from the soul, and truly from the soul. The soul being a Christian soul, a soul being just humanity. And as we went through this play, we were really looking at not playing emotion, but allowing the emotions of what these words represented have true life and true meaning. So often in most plays based in realism, you're driving to a specific point. You're trying to convince somebody else of something, and you're trying to make them see your point. Whereas this was truly just scrubbing off the scabs of the world and exposing this true human being to the world, not with any apologies, not with any conscious, but just saying, this is who I am, this is where I am. I don't ask you to accept me, I don't ask for anything except for you to actually hear me. And that really is a credit to Nathan Allen Davis as a playwright to create this in this monologue fashion, but not so that it's so didactic that it's preachy, but it is truly just exposing people as human beings through these words. So that was truly the poetry that we looked for, and the resonance and the pacing that we went for in our acting. Marcus?
Yes, I will piggyback onto that. Is that, with it being poetry, when you look at the actual script itself, it's written in in a poetic form. Not being iambic pentameter or anything like that, but it's obvious, that it was supposed to be poetry. So for me, the first thing that I did was go through and try to mark every single punctuation, because I knew that they were going to mean something. And there are a lot of moments where, there are what you would normally think perhaps they were rhetorical questions, but because it was certainly a question without a question mark, but even the delivery of it. And I had, moments where I struggled with, where I was asking the question in a rhetorical phrase and then would stop myself and realize, oh no, it doesn't work there. Just say it as the statement and then see where, what happens and where that emotion leads from there. So I really did play with the punctuations and how that moved and created and went in. There's also a lot of, and Donald will speak to this too, there was a lot of moments that were written in for pauses, where it was specific that Nathan Allen Davis, the playwright, wanted us to have these moments. And some of them felt like you could run a whole train through them. Now, honestly, there were moments where, as we developed these characters and developed our moments and developed the relationships, which is really what the play does, it really does bend towards the relationship between Nat Turner and Thomas Gray, the relationship between Nat and the guard. And then honestly, I think there was also another underlying relationship between Nat and his surroundings. And there's moments where I felt, that God became the space as well. So there were those moments where we had to go, all right, there's going to be this pause here. Where does that go? But then also what I found very interesting was the playwright himself does not confess himself to be a Christian. He believes in another religion, but he wrote, there are moments, especially in Nat's monologues, and one of the big scenes for sure, where Nat starts preaching. Like he's, in that Black Southern preacher tone of what they call whooping, where the music kind of falls underneath and he goes in, and so there's moments where you can feel like this rhythm starting to roll with Nat's talking and or it's speaking. And Lawrence and I were looking, he goes, do you know where that's going? Do you see where that's heading? You're going down the hill now. And so there were those moments where we had to find it, but I found that it helped figure that out with those punctuations, where those pauses went, and kind of defining the shifts, because they were certainly not just automatically known. There took a lot of just play shopping and working through it.
Well, you bring up a good point talking about rhythm, right? And, we have rhythm within our own monologues, certainly within scenes, certainly between, the characters. So, Donald, you played two different characters in this. One is the attorney, Thomas Gray, an educated man. And you play the guard, who I don't think has a name, if I'm correct, right? And I'm assuming an uneducated man. So talk a little bit about certainly your approach, the idea that an actor has to play two different roles, I think is interesting. And there may be folks listening who, don't have the experience of having done that before. So talk a little bit about that as it pertains to your ability to go from one scene as the attorney to the next as the guard. And then we'll talk, you can kind of bridge us into the idea of the rhythms that are different between these two men and how they have their rhythm with Nat.
Yeah, you got it. First of all, this is the kind of stuff that I live for as an actor. If you can give me more than one role in a show, I'm gonna have a great time. It was the main differences for me, the way that I approach this, right, is for me personally, I have to find a voice. And if I don't find the voice right away, then there has to be something about my body that influences that. So I knew that Thomas was going to have an upright chest, right? And then I felt like my nose go up, and then he felt like he was better than Nat. And I played with an accent and ended up trying to drop that, because so often, you've got the classic story of someone trying to leave their roots behind if they want to be seen as more, if they want to be seen as more superior, right? So he loses the voice. He loses the accent that he grew up with. He has more of a straight tone. He stands up straight. He looks down at Nat, or if he has his glasses on, he looks directly at him, but with his nose up. It's never on the same plane, which is a complete contrast to the guard, right? The guard is on the same plane with Nat. There was like the last week of working where something finally clicked for me. Where
What do you mean? What do you mean he's on the same plane?
He's on the same plane in that, and that's actually what I'm about to. So the Thomas Gray and Nat were a heart and a mind talking, right? Nat's the heart, Thomas Gray is the mind, and they go at it. The guard is on the same plane as Nat because it's two souls talking, right? They're two souls conversing. They both share a Christian belief. They both share a family background that isn't exactly like the nuclear family. Of course, that wasn't a thing then per se, but there's a brokenness to both of their families. They're both. We ended up saying that they were both soldiers in some form or another, right? So they share, even though they're on different sides of the tracks, they're not. And I wanted the guard to be real salt of the earth. So, he doesn't care about his posture. He doesn't care about what he's wearing. He doesn't need to get through to the next thought. He just needs to live in that moment. Whatever he's saying, whatever Nat's saying, he's just right there. In the next sentence, he's somewhere else. So that's how that's how Lawrence and I both kind of crafted those characters, is finding where the differences were. For Thomas, he's a fast talker when he needs to be. He's a very anxious guy. He's trying to get something out of Nat, and the guard is trying to get something out of Nat too, but he's trying to do it in a completely different way, where he's looking at someone who is, whether or not he realizes it, an equal to himself.
So talk about then, so we've got somebody, obviously we say he's educated, he He has knowledge of the world outside of perhaps this rural area,
Well versed.
well versed, but he's also far more fearful of
Yeah.
the world, right? And he certainly seems much more fearful of Nat than the guard. And
Yeah.
I don't, so, speak to that. I don't think it's just, the guard is a guard and he beats up
No.
prisoners and, the attorney doesn't. There's more to it. So, because I really think obviously it gets down to a lot of what's happening in our world today right now.
Yeah.
So speak a little bit to that. And obviously, Marcus, you jump in because you're part of that rhythm as well.
I think a part of what makes Thomas fearful of Nat never lies to Thomas throughout the entire play, right? That doesn't give anything away. I'll say that. Nat never lies to Thomas, I sincerely believe. But Thomas doesn't take that for face value. He had met with him the week before, and he questions everything at this point of what he said is to be true, right? That's where we start the play off, basically. It has to come from, Thomas has a child that he wants to protect. Nat has just gone around and he's done what he's done. But I think the real fear comes from what he's heard everyone else say about Nat, right? We don't know if Thomas has actually seen the real aftermath of what Nat has done. We don't know if he's seen with his own eyes, the victims or the remnants. We do know, however, that he's come into contact with people that have either seen Nat or heard about Nat or just demonized Nat. So it becomes this thing where Thomas now has this view of this person in which it's been just blown out of proportion, perhaps, off stage the week before, the week in between, that to a point where he doesn't take into consideration the person in front of him. He doesn't take into consideration that there is truth in things that he's saying. I think that answers the question. Marcus, if you want to jump in there.
I know we definitely discussed the relationships between both of the characters, and you're right on the money. And in fact, I remember one of the conversations that Lawrence had with you, Donald, about, do you think Thomas went to for lack of a better phrase, to the crime scenes? Did he do that research? Did he see the bodies? And what would that make you think or believe to how you spoke to Nat? And then, of course, we also talked a lot about, I know for me, Nat and the guard's relationship. I always felt that the words that Nat had to say to the guard were always this underlying conversation where he was trying to get the guard to understand that truly the only difference between he and the guard were chains, that they were literally the same. And there's a beautiful monologue, was that scene 2 where we talk about, standing in the rain and the field and all this other stuff. And I remember that moment where it clicked for both of us, where I said, these are two men that when they were kids, they would have been playing together and would have been all best friends until somebody else told the guard, you can't be friends with him. You can't play with him anymore. He's beneath you. You have to run him or own him or make him do, And so there's that beautiful moment there where I really feel like that's where the connection for those two characters is really oh, there's something truly there.
Mm-hmm.
And just because I know that you can't see them, maybe Mike, there were questions from some of our attendees, and I'm also watching on Facebook as well. And I know that Tasha wanted to know, and I don't know if this is giving away the ending or not, but since she's obviously seen the show, she wanted to know what you thought the guard did at the end of the show without giving away anything.
Yeah. So okay, no, I have to know. But the thing that she's asking is in fact historical context. So
yes,
can
well, if you study what happened to Nat Turner, you know what happens to him.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I think in the context of this show, there is good discussion to be had here, but I don't think you should answer her question point blank because I think it needs to really be left up to those listeners. And
Mm.
Tasha, don't get mad at me, but that's my opinion on this. But let me kind of bring that into a little bit more of a discussion, right? So some of the things that you both brought up, and Lawrence, I want you to kind of jump in on this as well too. So we have words like demonize. We have the horrific things that Nat Turner literally did to human bodies. I mean, by any sort of natural standards, we would go, that's horrific. Now, how it gets judged is where the discussion comes into play here. But the other thing that's balanced against that is Nat's desire to see the sunrise, right? So, you talk, in fact, I think at one point you tell somebody to get out of your way. I forget if it was Thomas Gray or the guard. You say, you're standing in my, in the light. And
Yes.
I'm assuming you just have one little window up there, where you can see the sky. So talk about how that balances between somebody who is demonized for the actions that he took, regardless of the reasons, and balancing that with the beauty of potentially seeing the sunrise when his just due is to be rendered. And how you approach that, certainly as a director, Lawrence, putting those actors together towards that moment.
Okay, so you're putting me up first. Okay. I was gonna sit back and listen to the actors discuss this first, but
See if they gave you the right answer. See if what you said sunk in.
See if everything that we've talked about over
and
the
then
last
just take
month.
credit for it when it's all done. That's right. Okay, good for you.
But so the reality is, the sunrise, everything about this play is under the spine that this gentleman did something that he believed was dictated by the word of God. And there is one line in this play, and if you never see this play or never do anything, I will share this line with you. What do you think the vengeance of God should look like? And that is the most telling line in the play. As he follows what he believes is God's word and God's beauty and God's horror. We think of Sodom and Gomorrah, the destruction of all these different people. We look at all of the stories in the Old Testament.
I was going to say it's all Old Testament stuff.
Right.
Yeah,
The
hell and
wrath of
brimstone.
God.
Yep. Fire and brimstone. Yep.
Fire and brimstone. What does the wrath of God look like? What is it supposed to look like? And then juxtapose that to, well, here is God showing you what beauty also looks like with sunrise. And the second line that I will share is, in heaven for Nat Turner, there is eternal sunrises. So it's that juxtaposition between what has to be done in this world. And this goes back to what I said earlier with our moral compass and where we place our morals in this struggle for freedom. What is it that we will accept as human beings as we fight for humanity? How horrific are we willing to go? How much of the beauty are we willing to actually accept? And that is just as hard as the other question of how far are we willing to go in the dark side? Are we willing to accept the beauty that is out there if we have harmony, if we have true humanity? Are we willing to allow that to be present? And for me, that was really the dichotomy in this play. We have to do, this gentleman had to do, and it's not just him, it's also Thomas Gray, it's the people that were part of the search parties, it was the slave owners, it was the state of Virginia, it was the country of America, it was the entire world that was implicated in this. What are we willing to do to really be humans and to have that humanitarian concept? We know what we're willing to do independently for the individual, but what are we willing to do collectively? And I think that's what Nat Turner brings up. And one of the things, oh my gosh, I keep forgetting her name, and she is like my soul spirit, my set designer. Help me, help me.
Amy Forrester.
Amy Forrester.
Yes.
One of the posters that she placed on the floor is Harriet Tubman's statement: if I could have convinced more slaves that they were slaves, I could have freed more slaves.
Mm-hmm.
And that is not, should not, I'm not saying is not, it should not be confined to the Africans that were enslaved in America, but to the entire population that was enslaved by this oppressive mentality. If I could have convinced everybody that this oppressive mentality is what it is, and it is actually holding all of us down from being who we can be and what we should be, I could change the world. And that is the dichotomy between that sunrise and that sunset. The sunset that starts this play with all the horrors and the atrocities that were committed on all sides, both by Nat Turner and the oppressive systems that created him, and the sunrise of the hope of where we can be. And in between that is, where do we realize that we are all part of this system? We're not the oppressors, we're not the oppressed, we are in this system of oppression. And do we really want to come out of it? So that's what I had to say.
I don't want to add anything because that was perfect. I will just say that I think that it is again just this beautiful, because I can't think of a better way to put it, but that it is that beautiful dichotomy of what we know of Nat Turner, what many, if you learned about Nat Turner or the rebellion at all, and that's a whole different conversation because many people don't, and I know I didn't learn about it until I was much older, but it is what you do here, and you can go and find, like if you do a YouTube search, you will find, stories and documentaries and stuff that are spoken primarily by white historians who just paint this man as, a demon, like using those, words where, so that then as you're learning about them or listening from other people's recounts of the story, you don't think of him as a man. You don't think of him as someone who would appreciate the simplicity of something like a sunrise or a sunset. And so I think that is, when we're talking about other people, and when I say we, I mean, the collective we. So when we Black folks talk about the other, or we white folks talk about the other, or we Asian folk talk about the other, we're really quick to talk about the things that bother us about them. So then you forget about the fact that, like my dad always says, everybody puts the pants on one leg at a time, right? You forget those simple things that do unite and connect us. And that's what I think, that's where the playwright is showing that, like Lauren says, it's, where do you find those connections of people? And so easy for us to point the finger and look at what we don't like about the other, where we forget that there are so many things that we really do appreciate together.
Yeah, I mean, big ideas, right? These are large ideas with large judgments, with large results by individuals. And I think there's a lot to be said for the messaging, put forth by certainly individuals, certainly in this case, Nat Turner, but also by, some of the presentation of what Thomas Gray is saying from his perspective as the oppressor, trying to understand that which he oppresses. It's almost like, why are you trying to, what's the larger picture there? And I think that's what brings up a really strong discussion. Lawrence, you brought up, the various posters and sayings that were on the set. Let's talk a little bit about the set and how this was presented. So so Amy Forrester was our scenic designer. She also designed the props for the show. So talk a little bit about how you and she came up with the idea of a rather sparse set. And we're going to talk about, streaming versus live, and the challenges that presents as well. And you're welcome to obviously bring that into the discussion. But give a little bit about how this came about with the presentation of the things that were on the floor, hung behind Nat and Thomas.
Yes. So kudos to the designers on this show. We were able to have true, honest discussions about what this play was about. And the thing that kept coming up was, this is not a historical play. This is not about Nat Turner back 200 years ago. This is about where we are from then to now, and the same struggles that we are encountering today. So as I talked to Amy, we were trying to figure out ways to really bring this play from, I was about to say antiquity, from yesteryear to present day. And what we were able to do was create our little Dante circle, our 3 rings of moral dilemma, going from slavery to the enslavement of Africans with Harriet Tubman and William Lloyd Garrison quotes and all of these things. And then the second level was our 1960s Black protest, our whole civil rights movement. And then our third level was contemporary struggles. And as we went through each one of those, we were trying to find posters that were emblematic of not just a Black ideal, but of our total ideals. What were other people saying? What was in America? What were the whites? What were the Blacks? Where were we in each one of these epochs? Without actually allowing our judgment or predisposition for their struggle to hinder us from showcasing that. Because again, that's what this comes down to, is that we are all struggling for this concept of freedom. Some of us are on one side of the track, some of us are on the other side of the track. And I will completely unbiasedly say I am for one side of the track rather than the other. But the reality is, my struggle is no better, is not more important than somebody else's struggle. So we wanted to make sure that both were a little bit balanced in this set. And so you will see different posters from different sides of the argument on the floor that helps us to really showcase that what Nat Turner and the Guard and Thomas Gray are debating is not something that lives 200, 300 years ago. This is something that we are looking at and examining and arguing and fighting for today for our future. And that's what we are hoping, or let me rephrase that. That's what the designers and I were hoping that the audience could take away. How are we really struggling for our envisioned future? Where do we put our flag in this floor? We don't necessarily have to condone any one action, but we definitely have to take a stance.
Well,
And
just to jump in for a second there, so these posters that you mentioned, they're kind of filtered in as the show progresses. There's no real shot where we go, oh my gosh, look, the poster is the center of that particular shot or that particular scene. Now, I will tell the viewers to make sure that you watch the entire show, including the credits at the end, because it's quite frankly a very emotional moment watching what's happening during the credits. I'm not going to give away all of what that is, but it obviously pertains to those posters that I mentioned there. But I think touching on one of the things you said there, though, was the idea that it's not just this historical piece, it's really talking about things that we're, struggling with nowadays, certainly. And these posters, as we call them, kind of filter their way into certain scenes and not. And sometimes you only get a little snippet of what that poster is too, because that's what I found myself going. And I work there, so I could walk down anytime during the day and look and see what it says. But as I was watching the show, seeing either Marcus or Donald in doing whatever they were doing in the scene, I might see just half of a phrase, and I'm trying to catch it, piece it together, perhaps with what's going on, in that particular scene. And I think you did all of that intentionally, because we had a number of cameras to help you, encourage a lot of different shots, whether be close-ups or different angles, things like that. Some of which were not from an audience member's perspective. So, talk a little bit about that as well too. I know I interrupted the thought, but I wanted to make sure you started filtering in a little bit about maybe some of where these shots are coming from, the reason for some of these shots.
Right. So yes, this was a unique experience, doing theater as film, and trying to really keep the spirit of theater, meaning this is the audience witnessing something, but also engaged in it. So when we think of film, or at least when I think of film, it's the audience not really having to engage with the performance. In live theater, the audience feeds off of the actors feed off of the audience, and it's kind of symbiotic creation. And that's what we were looking for in this. And with the posters helping to guide the audience in different thought processes, not necessarily to lead them to a thought, but to make them question what we are seeing in certain moments. And as you look in this jail cell, one of the greatest things that Amy and I, or Amy, I don't take any credit for this, that Amy was able to create, I said, this is about a man who believes in God. We have a jail cell. How can we create some of these symbols within it? And if you look, we have a couple of stone walls, but a lot of it is piping that is in crosses and different types of crosses all throughout the jail cell that helps to really speak to our own sense and sensibility of what do we think this Christianity is. If one person, and we have Thomas Gray, without giving it away, we have Thomas Gray who is on one side of the fence, we have Nat Turner who is on one side, and interestingly enough, we have a third side of the fence. And so we have these three different concepts of Christianity. And actually, as Nat Turner brings it up, we probably have a fourth. So throughout this, the filming and the set design, we were able to try and, or the hope was to try and encapsulate that idea that Christianity has many layers and many faces. Our moral sensibilities have many different layers and faces. So it was interesting to work with this filming to try and capture those moments. And I will say, in some ways, those were things we could not do in live theater. So it worked well for us.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are some shots where, as an audience member, you would never see that unless you had a video screen. So I think, it was extremely creative the way the team, was able to capture that. I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit, Donald, because I know you have some, experience in this. I do want to mention some of the other designers, though, because I know we're coming up on the hour here pretty soon. But Amy also designed the props. You had Kathy Kovarik, who designed the costumes, and I saw a number of compliments on social media for the costumes as well. Haley Northington did your lights. Now, obviously, you have a couple of things at play here as it pertains to lighting angles, shadows. You're not just lighting for the stage; you're lighting for camera, which brings certainly a different aspect to it. There's a sound design to this show. There are sounds that are involved in this. Jason Eschoffen was your sound designer, and your production manager, technical director, Philip Ewan, putting putting all of these pieces together. So so Donald, just kind of throwing it over to you briefly, give the folks out there watching and listening an idea of some of the additional technical requirements that we had here, right? So for a normal play, yes, we have the scenic, we have costumes, we have lights, we have sound, but we had other technical things that you as a cast, you as a production team had to deal with. Speak to that just briefly.
Yeah, so of course. So first of all, when you're in theater, you say every time that you do a show, you've got a new character, and that character is the audience. We didn't have the luxury of having that character on stage with us, or in the house with us. We had that character on stage with us. So we had the audience via a camera lens, right? And it's not something that you can react off of. But on a technical side of it, what that means is we don't have this one field that we project to like we do in proscenium. We have these 5 different lenses that we are giving more of our attention to. We've been collecting those over the course of a few months now here at Playhouse on the Square. We're using the same camera 5 different times, so we're having quality control on that. Pedro da Silva did some wonderful work. He comes in as the videographer, or as the DP of the shot, and he storyboards. This is his second or third, depending on how we treat a project that we did back in fall. His second or third full-length feature that he's done with us. So he'll come in with a storyboard. He'll come in, he'll talk shots with Lawrence. Something similar that's happening right now with me and Courtney as we're preparing for Murder for Two.
Courtney Oliver, who is directing Murder for Two.
Yes. And what it comes down to then on the day of the shoot, right, is we're shooting this entire show over the course of multiple days. So we're not coming in one day and doing, okay, 7 o'clock go, and then we're done at 9, right? We're doing a 10 to 1 shoot, and we're doing 2 scenes in that 10 to 1. And furthermore, as an actor and as a storyteller, as someone in the theater, we all know that from night to night, you're not going to take the same step twice. You're going to walk the same path, but you might go with your left and then leave with your right the next night. You don't really have that luxury when it comes to filming, especially if you're doing multiple shoots. So we have to think about continuity. We have to think about, okay, so the last time I did this scene, I'd messed up. There was actually, you'll never know it if you watch it, but I boo-booed a little bit of blocking, right? And I got a matchbox out. It fell down. I put the matchbox back in. And then at the end of the shoot, Lawrence was like, "Hey, Donald, that wasn't exactly correct, but make sure to do it again."
Right.
And I was like, "Yeah, no, you're right. I was, yep." So we have to maintain that continuity. In the next shoot, I had to maybe not drop the match again, but I had to follow the same path. I had to put it in the bag, then realize I had to take it back out of the bag. So that's the new layer, right? And we get to do this not many times because we're on a very condensed schedule, but we do get to try to do a scene 1 or 2 more times. And if it's from multiple different takes, like 5 static shots and then a gimbal, which is kind of this mobile go wherever you can go shooting device, run and gun kind of thing, then we have to do that scene twice already as it is, even if there were no mess ups in the first one. And those are a few of the fun little notes of film. And you're muted, Mike.
Yes, I am. I muted myself when I didn't mean to. Yeah, I mean, it's extremely interesting, isn't it? And again, for our our watchers, our viewers, and our listeners out there, each of these shows have different contracts, licensing contracts, and some of them allow us to do what happened during this production, where we could take bits and pieces over a few days and put it together. When we do Murder for Two, those productions will actually be filmed in whole, as a whole piece. Now, the reason there is different is because there's really no clean break where you can get, the continuity that Donald talks about. We did get some questions, and I know we need to wrap up here pretty soon, Marcus. And I wanted to get to a couple of these. Tasha said that she sees Nat like one of God's avenging angels, full of love and light, but with blood on his hands. And it brings me into the question that Lucy Houston sent us. She said, what is your perspective on Nat's reasons for his acts? Now, I'm not sure if she's asking Marcus or if she's asking your experience as a Black man or something even, bigger than that.
Yes, I will go in for that, and I will be as brief as I possibly can with it, because I think it's a very long possible discussion with it too. It's yes, I can totally see, Nat as, as an avenging angel, and there is certainly, biblical evidence to that, that this is, as Lawrence has said, this is a war. It's a war for humanity, and what is necessary and what's not, and that is really decided by those that are in the middle of it. So I would imagine, I believe that, especially for the purpose of this show, is that Nat he comes to terms with what he feels like that he was told that he had to do, that he was instructed to do from the very beginning. There's historical references where he refers to that he believes that that from the moment that he was born, those around him said, knew that he was touched by God, essentially, that, he had visions, he could see things that he shouldn't have known at such a young age. So that he was already like an emissary of God. So he understood from an early age, and just from the living of his life, that he heard God, that he saw the signs in the corn and in the wind and in the air, that he was supposed to do what he's supposed to do. And I think that it's one of those things where he knew that though what he did was harsh and bloody, that his absolution would come from what would happen to him. So there is never, for folks who have seen the show, but if you have not seen the show, you will see and notice that there is never a moment truly where he feels remorse for what he did, or feels like that he wasn't supposed to do it. He followed his course, he ran his race, and he's ready for his reward.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's so many layers, and as an actor, I know that's exactly why you dive into something like this. And certainly, as a director, Lawrence, the ability to work with actors and finding these inner truths, whether it's, as you said, collectively or as an individual with these stories, is so important. And I hope that the folks who are watching, if you've not yet seen the show, we really encourage you to to get your streaming ticket and get online and do that. We're coming up to the hour, so I want to thank all of our guests who are here today. I want to thank Lawrence Blackwell, who is directing this wonderful production. I want to thank our two cast members, Marcus Cox and Donald Sutton. I'm biased. All three of these folks do a great job, and I really want you to partake. And I encourage all of you who are watching and listening to please tell your friends, tell your colleagues, tell your folks at school, tell your folks at work to really partake in this show. Again, I'll remind you, you can get tickets from our website, which is playhouseonthesquare.org. You can also go to showtix4u.com, and that's with the number 4, all right? You can go to their website and search for Playhouse on the Square and do that. We've got some other wonderful streaming shows coming up through June. We hope that we will be able to open up to real live human beings coming into our theater starting in July. We'll see. We certainly encourage all of you to wear your masks. We hope that you all get vaccinated. It will be those reasons that will help us move forward in opening up our community, and certainly have a safer environment for all of the folks to enjoy what we're doing. And we want people to stay healthy because the arts heal, the arts are good for discussion. I hope we had a good discussion for you today. It's certainly one that could go on for an entire semester, right? To talk about all of these important messages. Again, thank you to everyone. Marcus, you usually run these. Have I forgotten anything?
I think you did a great job, Mike. Continue to follow us on all social media channels. Just search for Playhouse on the Square.
Yes, please. So again, thank you all, and we will see you at the theater, maybe virtually, hopefully in person. Good night.
Thank you.